Now, in this section, we're going to talk about culture of Greece and all the things that Alexander was trying to spread throughout the known world. And so there are a lot of different aspects of the Greek culture that are important that continue to progress further into Europe and then eventually make their way over to the Americas as well. So the essence of the Greek culture is summed up in the term Hellenic, because the Greeks called themselves Hellenes and they called the land Hellas. We have attributed the term Hellenistic to describe all things Greek. And so that term Hellenistic is more than just Greek culture. It is actually to be like the Greek. And this is the term that they are going to use to try to spread all of the Greek ideas throughout Alexander's empire. It's more than just knowing a little bit about them. It is trying to transform people to become like the Greek. And so the Hellenistic culture spreads throughout the known world because of Alexander's influence. And one of the important philosophies that the Greeks adopted was nothing in excess and everything in proportion. And so they promoted ideas here of self control, restraint, love for the arts, a zest for life, independence, studying philosophy, mathematics, and literature. And all of these things are part of what we would consider to be Hellenistic and that Alexander is going to spread throughout his empire. The culture here united the people from the east to the west for the very first time. And it's a unified culture where everybody is now part of a similar idea that opens the pathway for the gospel to be spread under the political control of the Romans. You see, when the Romans come in, the Romans conquer these Greek city states and conquer the Greek Empire. The Romans are going to allow for the Hellenistic ideas to continue to spread because they see value in a lot of that. And because many people have similar identifying features in the way that they believe and in their philosophy and outlook on life, that helps to promote the spread of the gospel among similar people. Among similar people. So let's talk about how that is expressed and some of the ideas within all of this. There's a lot of focus on man and the fact that man is one of the greatest creations that the world can offer. Now, unfortunately, their ideas are misdirected because they don't attribute all of this creation to God, but they pour into the study of the humanities. They pour into studying mankind, of studying human thought, studying culture, studying the human mind and how it reasons and its abilities. But once again, their focus is misplaced. Their focus is not on the God who created all of these things. Their focus is instead on, wow, we are awesome. So let's celebrate that awesomeness, or let's investigate why the human mind is so awesome. And as they begin to focus more and more on the creation rather than the creator, they began to develop a philosophy which said man is the measure of all things, that man is the source of all wisdom and source of all knowledge. And they put their ideas together and they called that philosophy or a wisdom journal. And they have philosophers who are lovers of wisdom. And these philosophers are the ones that people look to for guidance in life. They try to answer the important questions to life, questions like, where did I come from? Or why am I here? Where am I going? What is the highest good in life? What is the purpose to life? And these philosophers try to answer those questions for all of the people in the Hellenistic culture, and many of them came up with answers. Some of them were more accurate than others, but unfortunately, many of them were not biblical. One of the first philosophers was a man by the name of Thales of Miletus. He is the father of philosophy. And in his philosophical ideas, he tried to express all things in terms of nature. And so one of his statements was that all things came from water. Everything in the universe goes back to some sort of natural term. And while there is a lot of water in our nature, and there is a lot of water, that water does sustain a lot of life, he is not attributing his ideas, or not attributing God as the source of all life there. And then we have Socrates, probably one of the best known of all the philosophers. He lived in Athens during the Golden Age. He had a famous motto of "Know thyself," to contemplate your own thoughts and actions. And he came up with the Socratic method. And the Socratic method was the idea that the teacher was constantly questioning the student. And it becomes a very popular teaching style. And many follow after and pattern their teaching style after Socrates and his method here. And he had a very strict way in his educational system that if you didn't want to participate and you didn't want to think about what he was questioning or how to respond to those questions, then you just were not welcome any longer in his school. He believed that truth could only be achieved through human reason, and that ignorance then produces evil. So if you're not willing to learn and willing to expand your knowledge, then you are headed in the direction of evil. And so his ideas here were questioned, and in fact, he is the one who is sentenced to death because many people believe that he was then corrupting the youth of Athens and rejecting the gods of Athens, and therefore they did eliminate him. We also have Plato. Now, Plato was a student of Socrates, which he learned a lot from him, but he went in a few different directions. He established his own school, which was named the Academy. And he wrote a book by the name of The Republic. And this is where he reveals a lot of his ideas about the perfect society, the perfect government, his idealistic view of what those would look like. And in his belief system, he believed that reality and truth could not be part of the physical world. In order for something to be true, it has to be eternal. So anything that is part of this physical world that passes away or can be destroyed cannot be eternal in his mind. We also have Aristotle, who studied at Plato's Academy. He tutored Alexander the Great. In his mind, reality was in the physical world. So the only thing that was truly real was something that you could experience with the senses, something that you could see, taste, touch, smell. And he developed a syllogism, which is a thinking process, a rationale, which we're not going to have time to go into syllogism extensively, but it sounds kind of like this, that it's a three-step thinking process. So he would say, if all Greeks are human, and Aristotle is a Greek, therefore Aristotle is a human. And it's a rationale that was developed there by Aristotle. Epicurus, he developed the idea that happiness and pleasure would be achieved through avoiding pain and fear. Imagine that. You'd be happier if you could avoid pain and fear. Seems pretty simple to me, but that was his main philosophical idea. Now, he had many other complex ideas beyond that, but that's a quick overarching view of his ideas, that was the meaning of life. Stop pain, stop fear, and you're going to find the meaning of life. There's also Stoicism, which was founded by a man by the name of Zeno. And this was the idea that man is controlled by fate. And so, therefore, if fate is controlling all of your decisions, there's nothing you can do about it. You can't stop fate. You can't change fate. And so you just got to roll with it. You got to go with it. And that was a idea that was still continuing on in the life and time of Jesus Christ, that he had to deal with Stoics who didn't see why they needed a savior, why they needed to fix their sin problem, because fate was going to control all of that anyway. The Greeks were well known for their advancements in science, medicine, and math. Pythagoras, perhaps you've heard of him, he developed a theorem by explaining the universe in mathematical terms, and you have probably exercised this in your math classes. You have Pythagoras to think about that, to thank for that, if you've ever done a squared plus b squared equals c squared. We also have Hippocrates. Hippocrates is known as the father of medicine, and he taught that every illness has a natural cause. And so rather than just treating the symptoms, let's look for what is the root cause of all of this, what's really going on, and let's try to cure that. And then we have Euclid. Euclid was the father of geometry, and he wrote a book by the name of Elements, and this book became the basis for all of the geometry textbooks. And while some of the elements have changed, many of the things that you study in geometry today were things that were developed through Euclid's study, or at least the foundational principles from Euclid's study there. Eratosthenes, he developed the circumference of the globe using the geometric theories from Euclid. And so, for the first time, we had a realistic view on how big our world was. He is also responsible for creating and developing the latitude and longitudinal lines on the globe that we studied earlier in the year for geography. A couple of famous people in the literature world. Herodotus is known as the father of history because he is one of the first people who set out to write a history book. And he wrote an account of the Persian Wars. And he wanted to make sure to document for future governments, for future students, for future people to know what happened in these wars. Now, this was a very biased account based off of his perspective, but he still wrote down what was going on, and we get an idea of what those wars were like thanks to Herodotus' writings on that war. Thucydides took a different approach. He wrote on the Peloponnesian War, and he did very similar to what Herodotus did, tried to preserve history, wanted people to know the story of what was going on, but he did it in an unbiased way, in which he took both sides. And really, Thucydides becomes a pioneer in the writing of historical text because of the fact that he took ideas from both perspectives. And really, that's what we want to do as historians. We want to look at both sides of it. Unfortunately, a lot of history is written more like Herodotus, where it is written by the victor, and so we only see one perspective. And that's why we need to dig a little bit deeper to see more of what's going on. As we sum up this unit here, we see that the Greek culture becomes the widespread culture of the world, and its influence is extended beyond the boundaries of its empire itself. The culture of the Greeks is going to continue throughout our study into the mighty Roman Empire, and the Romans will then transform that Greek culture into a global power, and they'll bring what the Greeks lacked in government and leadership and organization into something that the world had never seen up to that point.